Hello, this is Sondra Oster Baras bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is Vaetchanan, and in chapter 5 we have the Ten Commandments. Now we've already seen the Ten Commandments before in the book of Exodus at the time that it actually happened, the revelation at Sinai. We have the whole story there, and we have the Ten Commandments themselves. But here is part of Moses's in this Torah portion in particular, Moses moves from a more historical review that he is presenting to the nation to a more repetition or even introduction of commandments. The purpose of most of the book of Deuteronomy is not so much to recap history. Much more of Deuteronomy is devoted to the laws themselves. And so as he's beginning one of the laws, he starts with the covenant at Sinai, and he lists the actual Ten Commandments. And here I thought would be an opportunity to give a sense of what is the Jewish tradition with regard to these commandments, particularly what are the Ten Commandments and how are they divided. Now, I came to learn in recent years in my frequent and wonderful interactions with Christians that actually the Christians count the Ten Commandments differently. Okay? We begin the Ten Commandments with verse 6. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. That's a sentence. That is the beginning of the first commandment. What I discovered is that Christians see that as an introduction, kind of saying, I'm the Lord, I'm the one who's going to be giving you these commandments. Here are the commandments. And then they begin the first commandment with, you shall have no other gods beside me. So we see this differently. Now, what does that mean? What is our perspective? So first of all, you shall have no other gods beside me is really an ancillary to the first verse. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. What is this, what is this all about? Number one. Number two, actually, the verse, you shall have no other gods beside me, there are some traditions that anchor that with the first, I'm the Lord your God, but most traditions connected to the second. You shall have no other gods beside me, you shall not make for yourself a sculptured image, any likeness, blah, blah, blah. What does this mean? For us, the first commandment is, I am the Lord your God. What is the commandment? It's not an introduction, it is the essence. The first commandment is to believe in God, to believe in the God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Now, one of the, very often there are very different ways, to define God, who's God, etc. And one of the things that we will see, God is defined in the Ten Commandments in a few different ways. But here it's very consistent. I am the Lord God who took you out of the land of Egypt. Okay? What we will see later on, however, is when it comes to the Sabbath, God is going to, in the commandment of the Sabbath, God is going to remind us that he created the world. Okay? And that, by the way, is where a major difference is between the commandment in Exodus and the commandment in Deuteronomy. Because in Exodus, God says, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and sea. Okay, so we are reminded of God the Creator. On the other hand, in Deuteronomy, even the commandment of Sabbath is referring to the Exodus from Egypt, which, if you ask me why the difference, this to me is a part of Moses focusing on something that is the most relevant to the people he's talking to. You, the generation, you were babies or your parents left Egypt, and this becomes the most critical thing. But anyway, that's not what I want to focus on today. Why is it that we need a commandment to believe in God? And I think this is very, very important. We can all say God exists. Why does he need us to believe in him? He does not need us to believe in him. We need to believe in him. No commandment makes any sense if we are not going to first believe in God. And therefore, God is not going to take it for granted that we will believe in him. He has to command us to believe in him. And I think that is a very, very interesting and important perspective. And I think also there are people that have often said, and I hear this a lot among Jews of different colors and stripes, who will say, you know what, I'm not sure if God exists, but I love the Jewish way of life, okay? And I hear from Christians who, have their own way of belief, okay? And they'll say, well, I love the Jewish Sabbath, so I want to be part of the Jewish Sabbath, but I'm not going to change my beliefs. I believe in Christianity. Now, what someone does or doesn't do is fine, but I think you have to understand that to be a Jew and to obey the commandments that God gave uniquely to Jews, you have to first believe in God. That becomes the foundation for everything. Okay? So that's the first commandment. The second commandment is, yes, derives from the first commandment, but is completely separate. You shall have no other gods before me. And what does that mean? What are other gods? Well, other gods could be anything. It could be the stars and the moons and the skies. That's part of it, okay? But then we get more specific. Not just the skies and the moon and the skies, which you can make your God, but don't make a sculpture. Don't make a likeness. Okay, let's say, you think, oh, the stars are great, and then you're going to make a star, or you're going to, all of the various types of pagan worship, whether you're worshiping something in nature or you're worshiping an image of some kind, all of this is absolutely wrong, okay? You shall not bow down to them or serve them, okay? So in here we have a very, very, unlike any of the other commandments, here is the only commandment where you have a punishment, okay? You have visiting the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the third and fourth generations of those who reject me, but showing kindness to the thousandth generations of those who love me. And so where is this punishment and reward placed? In this very important second commandment, not to worship pagan gods. There is only one God. We have to believe in him. That's commandment 1. And commandment 2, there should be no other gods. It's one God. No competing, no pageantry, no groups, nothing. And then, of course, we go on to the third commandment, not taking the name of God in vain. The fourth commandment is to keep the Sabbath, which we already discussed briefly. The fifth commandment is to obey your father and your mother. Now, and then we have the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th commandments are all commandments that I would view as universal principles, that if God hadn't written them in the Bible, it's something we should just understand, okay? Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, and do not covet your neighbor's wife, okay? Or don't covet all kinds of other things, okay? Not to covet. So these 5 commandments are clearly commandments that I would refer to as universal in nature, and they are also all connected with what should be a normal, kind society. Society cannot exist if it's not predicated on these 5 commandments of respect for one another, respect for one another's property, respect for the integrity of the family, respect for human life, etc. What do we do with the 5th commandment? Okay, now, why am I asking this? Because it is traditional in Judaism to see the 2 tablets, picture that, 5 and 5, that there's a division. The first 5 commandments are actually commandments that relate to our relationship with God, and we saw that very, very distinctly in the first 4 commandments. Belief in God, against idolatry, not taking the name of God in vain, and keeping the Lord's Sabbath. 4 commandments that are all about relationship between man and his Creator. The last 5 commandments are clearly all about people, relationships between people in order to have a foundation of a good society. But in the first group of commandments, the 5th commandment is actually honoring your father and mother. Well, you would say that is a classic type of commandment that belongs in the second section. It belongs in the section that is universal. It is about relationships between people. But I think, and this is what our sages are saying, this is Jewish tradition, that the commandment to honor your parents belongs in the section of honoring God. because parents become God's messengers on earth. The whole structure of Judaism, which begins also, this message is repeated over and over again during the Exodus from Egypt, where God says, you will tell your children, you will recite the story to your children. And there's this commandment that's so inherent in Judaism, that is the duty of the parents to tell the children about God, to ensure that the children understand the commandments. And over again, we have this idea of tell your children, teach your children, ensure that your children follow God as well. That's what honoring your father and mother is all about, because if the parents become the vehicles for transmitting the messages of God to the next generation, the commandment to honor your parents is part and parcel with the commandment to obey and honor God. And I think that is really a brilliant, brilliant message. And I would also point out that the most amazing reward that we see, and again, most of these commandments don't carry with them a particular reward or punishment. We saw an exception to that on idolatry. Here's another exception. When you honor your father and mother, you will have long life. Why will you have long life? Because when you honor your father and mother, you're honoring God. And there's no better expression of choosing life than honoring both your parents and God. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that film. And we have lots more film content and emails and articles that I'm sure you will enjoy as well. Check out our website at CFOIC.com and subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that right from the homepage. I know you will really enjoy the content that will land in your inbox on a regular basis. Hope to see you soon.